Hey everyone, welcome back. We're so excited that you could join us. And today I have with me Nicole Pine, who is our senior support specialist, who's going to really walk us through best practices as it relates to ensuring that your inventory is top notch, that it is clear, it's concise, it gives you the most detailed information possible. So welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're excited to have you. So one of the things that I want to talk about first before we get into best practices, and there's really three that we're going to focus on today, really want to spend a little bit of time talking, about the behind the scenes and how we map our frames, and while it's important to make sure that everything is in there correctly, why we standardize those brands for all of our practices.
Sure. So if we think about it, a lot of practices have several different employees through the years, and they may have had multiple people enter frames. And as you bring them on, maybe you get them added a little differently. So I want to take you into an account where we can take a look at this. So here in the EDGEPro, I'm taking a look at the practice breakout, and there's actually a filter that a lot of team members don't really know about. And this is where we can take the mapping or the view from a standard mapping, which is how we are able to basically tell EDGEPro how to take care of the information, or you can look at the practice view. And when we go into the practice view, this is going to allow us to see multiple entries of a brand and different things that you would need to know. So for example, here is the Judith Lieber collection, and you can see here that there's actually 4 different ways of entering this just into this one practice alone. So if we look at this, there's about 10 frames here, but you'd have to kind of count those up and figure out exactly how many you had for this collection. This happens often. We do see it a lot, so that's why we do have our standard mapping. And it just allows us to take it and put all of those into one category there for the Judith Lieber. And if we go back to standard, we'll show you that the Judith Lieber is in here, and it's all put together in one. You can see the manufacturer, there's all 10 frames. It also puts the money together so that you can see it in a clear, concise view.
I love that. I remember when we didn't have the standardized button and having to go through here and count all of these frames and add up all the dollars. How time consuming was that? So
Very.
I love this feature. And so it just makes things easy for all practices. So if they don't have the manufacturer in there, that's okay, because EDGEPro's brain has been mapped to know and programmed to know that a Judith Lieber belongs to, this manufacturer, or Kate Spade belongs to Saflo. So that's really cool. I love that. Nicole, the other thing that I love about EDGEPro is that I love that we categorize our frames by ophthalmic, sons, and kids. And just recently, I was working with a practice, and we were trying to help them understand their turn rates and make some decisions about, buying frames and things like that. And one of the things as I was going through this, one brand stood out the most, and it was like Vera Bradley, for example. And Vera Bradley has, women's, it has tweens, it also has sons within their collections. And as we were sitting there talking, I was like, so, hey, out of curiosity, like, great job. You sold 171 units of Vera Bradley. That's amazing. But out of curiosity, are any of these Vera Bradley frames sons or kids? And they were like, oh, yes. And I'm like, have you sold any of them? And they were like, yes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so we need to categorize these a little bit differently so that we get a true picture of exactly what it is you're selling as it relates to son, kids, and ophthalmics. So Nicole, if we have a practice that, a brand, any of them, quite honestly, Kate Spade does the same thing. We all know that Ray-Ban does a fabulous job of identifying what's a son, what's an RX, and what's a kids. But some of the other manufacturers don't have that in the description. And so what should a practice do to ensure that these brands are categorized correctly?
Yeah, this is an important piece because, with all of the different brands, they're branching out. Some of them have started with sun, and so they're branching into that ophthalmic and the kids categories. And so whenever this happens, there is a way for you to track it. So I want to bring you back to this practice view again. So if we take this practice view, and we're going to scroll down a little here, we're going to look at our sons and our kids. So for kids, for example, there are some brands that they're just kids. And then there's others that actually specify kids. So whenever you're putting it into your practice management system or you're pulling this over from a frames data, this detail is there. However, there's sometimes where it's not there, especially for the sunglasses. And so you can actually add maybe before the brand name or after the brand name, you can add kids and sons. So for example, here you can see Champion Kids, the Nicole Miller Kids, but then when we look down here at sons, this practice actually has quite a few. And so it's really good that they're actually able to come in and track that and capture it. So we have some that say sun in the beginning. There's some where they have sun at the end. And look, there's another Judith Lieber collection. So this way, we actually didn't lump it into those ophthalmic frames. We knew that we were able to separate those out and give them that distinct view. So then they're able to see those Judith Lieber ophthalmic versus the Judith Lieber sun. So this is a great tool. And all you have to do is come in and change that filter.
And so if someone needed to set that up in their practice management system, where would they go about being able to do that?
Sure. So generally you want to set this up in your inventory. There's usually a designer field or a collection field. And if you're not quite sure, one of the things that you can do is you can see in this practice view what it looks like for your other frames, and then you'll be able to tell. So generally it is always going to be a designer or collection. We also have the Need Help Center over here that can provide you some best practices in the field based on your practice management system.
Oh gosh, that's great. I love the fact that, a practice has the ability to do that. It's a little bit time consuming up front, isn't it? Just to have to go in there and add that in. But when you think about just the little bit of work that you're doing on the upfront, when you go through and start analyzing your data, you're going to be so happy that everything is categorized and identified so clearly. And now you're able to make those sound business decisions as it relates to your frames.
Exactly. It does take a little bit in the beginning, but if you think about it, you're generally going to spend 10 to 15 minutes maybe adding these in here and getting the descriptions in correctly, and then you're finished. So it's kind of a set it and forget it thing. So that's pretty easy whenever you know that once you're done, it's always going to be in there correctly.
Yeah, that's great point. So don't be afraid to spend a little bit of time on the upfront and just get everything in there. You will be so much happier, and less time is going to be involved when it comes to analyzing your frame boards.
Yep.
Nicole, in one of our earlier sessions, we talked about leveraging particular frames with our managed care plans. And we typically call these high margin products. Some people call them closeouts. And so in that presentation that we talked about, there's a certain percentage of high margin product frames that a practice should be utilizing as it relates to those plans. And the end result is really all about profitability. So first and foremost, how would you even go about categorizing a high margin product frame? Is it going to be the same thing that we did for, sons and kids? And once I get that information in there, we don't have a bucket for high margin products, right? We don't have a category of high margin products like we do for, sons and kids. So where within EDGEPro would a practice be able to find that information so that they could track the number of units sold and then calculate that percentage out?
Sure. So those are great questions. When we're trying to be as detailed as possible and we get these high margin or these closeout frames, it's a great thing, and you really want to know what you're bringing in for those. So again, I'm going to stay here on the practice breakout, and I'm going to actually stay in the practice view. So for example, here's some right here. The best way for you to categorize these is just like the kids and the sun. That HM or the HP or the HMP, however you want to to describe it, you want to kind of make sure that you have the same description throughout, but you're just going to come in and you're going to edit that description or the collection field, and you're going to put HM or HMP, whatever the little code is, but just make sure that you separate it out, put it either on the front or at the end of the description, and it'll come over and it'll look just like this. So that when you are ready to track those, you want to take a look, you can come in, again, change this from standard to practice, and then they're going to be right here. So this will show you. So then all you have to do is come in, grab the totals from each one, because you really do want to look at this by brand. It is very important. Double check through your list to make sure you don't have too many others, and then you can take those and make the calculation. There's a few more. Make that calculation based on your total numbers of ophthalmic, kids, sun, and total frames.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, because that's important. You know, we've talked about it, and now we want to be able to track that, and you easily can be able to do that just by putting a little identifier on the front. Okay, so that's another great question for you. Where should we be putting sons and kids and H&P? Is it better to put it at the front of the brand or behind the brand?
So I always go with the front, and the reason why that's my recommendation is because sometimes there's a limited amount of characters that you can put in these fields within your practice management system. And so if you were to put it at the end, it might get cut off, and then you would be missing that detail. So definitely recommend the front, you know, right before the brand. That way you can come in and it's super easy, because then you can come in, put these in alphabetical order, and all of your high margins are right there together.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so just to recap, when it comes to categorizing our kids and our sons, we can see that in the standardized view. But then when we need to come back and take a look at high margin product, we need to go into the practice view. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. Love it. Nicole, the last thing that I want to focus on as it relates to best practice are no brands and miscellaneous frames. And I know we see this a lot, and in just, you know, working with practices, and when we do their practice assessment on EDGEPro, this is one thing that I go in and I start talking about is like, I would love to be able to help you do your turn rates and your profitability, but we've got so many, you know, miscellaneous or so many no brands in here. I don't know what they go to. And to do anything, you know, I wouldn't be able to give you a fair assessment of what those numbers look like. So, you know, long story short, it can just really skew turn rates. It can skew profitability. And those two things alone misguide doctors and practice managers in making those sound frame buying decisions. So, Nicole, what I would love for you to do in our last few minutes together, can you explain why we see no brands and miscellaneous frames as a brand? And the second question for you is, how would a practice go about updating their practice management system so that all frame sales are identified by a specific brand and not no brand or miscellaneous?
Sure, I completely understand. This can be an area of frustration, and we really want to make sure that we're able to provide to you the most accurate, detailed information, especially when you're looking at your brands. Your frame board is a big deal, and you need to understand exactly what you're selling. So one of the biggest things that I found is some practices, they just enter frame in the brand. They want to make it quick and easy for the staff. However, it's more important that you put that descriptive, detailed information. So for example, this one right here is no brand, and that's one. However, I've seen practices where all of the frames are no brand, and there is that makes it very difficult for you to do your frame board management. And so if you also look at up here, we have the miscellaneous frames. Miscellaneous frames are going to cause you some issues too. This one's 14 frames in this time period, which could make or break one of your brands. So let's talk about the differences and why they may be a little different. So the no brands is where, again, like the example I used, where they just had frame in the designer or the collection field instead of match, Prada, Pro Design. Those are descriptive, detailed brands, and whenever we see no brand or miscellaneous, it's generally because we just do not see a brand in there that is identifiable. So that means it says frame. Maybe it's a model number that your team put in instead of the detailed brand information in the brand or collection field, they put the model number. And so a lot of different brands have the same model number, or the same, maybe the same numbers or something. So it's very difficult to actually get in there and make sure that you have the details. So it's extremely important to go into your practice management system, take a look at your inventory specifically, and make sure that your brands are detailed. And that's where you can go in. You can even make this one big thing. You want to go in and make sure all of your brands are super detailed with the actual brand name. You may not want to give some abbreviations, because abbreviation that you may feel is for Pro Design may actually be the same type of abbreviation for another brand. Or I've seen where they abbreviated a brand and it actually made it another brand, because, for example, OGA, maybe there's a brand that you would think OGA would work with, and that's something that we've seen. So I like to give you a variety of examples to kind of help you, because every practice is a little different. As you've seen, there are multiple ways to enter things, and we just want to help you to get into the descriptive, detailed information so that you can see the most detailed information.
So, so true. Nicole, this has been absolutely amazing. And I so appreciate you taking time out of your incredibly busy day to help bring to light, some of the best practices that really could make a huge impact for doctor owners and practice managers when it comes to their frames. One thing before we leave, you mentioned our Needed Help Center. Can you direct us where a practice could, or a doctor or an optician could find additional support as it relates to identifying frames?
Sure. So our Need Help Center is wonderful. It has a vast resource of information, and if you click on it, it'll actually open and expand. You can type in information, or you can scroll through, and here's where you're going to find our best practices. So these are all of the practices, our practice management systems we're currently integrated with, and all you have to do is click on the information, and you're going to find inventory setup. So this will be where the details, you can go in and edit those. So every practice management system is different, and every field is a little different. So we went ahead and made sure that whenever you click on the inventory setup, you're going to be able to see where you need to go to get the information updated. For example, let's go to Revolution, frame inventory. This is where it is. It pulls the frame brand from the brand field. So that is where you're going to be able to find the detailed information. And we're going to give you a little more information here about the sun, the kids, and even the high margin frames.
That's awesome. And there's even a recording in there too, right? I think it back up the top in that above the blue box, there was a recording that takes you back to that specific practice management system's inventory setup. So it's all there.
I'll just show you again. I want to make sure that everyone is aware. There's also the chat feature. If you're in here and you're actually having trouble trying to find out, or you'd like a little more information, reach out to the support team. Take a look. Here's our little chat feature. Click on that and ask us the question. We're all here. We've all been trained on the practice management systems, and we'll give you the best possible information. And if you need us to help guide you there, we can do that too.
We do have the best support team ever, and I love it.
I agree.
Because we're live chat, and we stand by to help whatever we need to do for our practices. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today, and what I can't think of a better way to wrap up our series. For those of you out there, feel free to reach out at any time. We're here to support you and help you. Our goal is to help you grow your practice, and the proof is in your data. So have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you again on our next series.